friends. So today we're going to look at what not to do. We're going to talk about 5 ways that you can sabotage yourself so you don't take the next right step. Number 1, make your goal people-pleasing. This will require you to go out and get everyone's opinions on what they think you should be doing next. And then you'll need to try to accommodate everyone, which of course will lead you to not being able to come up with a plan, giving up, and basically considering yourself a failure. Okay, number 2, focus on the lack. Focus on all the things that you don't have. Remind yourself that in order to reach your goal, you need to have X, Y, Z. And of course, even if you realize that X is attainable, there's going to be something that follows after that you can't have Y though because of A, B, C. And eventually you'll create a gulf so big it becomes, rather than just taking a step forward, you're trying to cross the Grand Canyon and you realize that it's an impossible feat, so you give up. Number 3, take on a role that you're not supposed to. So like we looked at in the last video, you have a rubric for life. The roles that God has given you and the responsibilities and ways that you're supposed to fill those roles. Now, the perfect way to sabotage yourself so that you can't take the next step forward is to take on a role that God has not given you to fulfill. This way, you're filling up your scorecard, your assessment of yourself and how you're doing with all these kinds of frustrations because you're not able to do those things or fulfill that role perfectly. And you'll have so much stress and anxiety that you won't be able to even see the next step. Plus, that next step doesn't even exist because there's no way for you to actually, in the reality that God's created, try to fulfill that role or to succeed in filling that role. Number 4, spend time worrying. If you spend enough time worrying, you won't have to spend any time taking the next step. So let your mind chase after all of the what ifs and all of the what could have been, and eventually you'll find that you have no time to take the next step. Number 5, tell yourself you're going to fail. This is equivalent to the kid who gets up on the diving board and is staring down into the pool and continues to say out loud, I can't, I can't, I can't. Either someone's going to push you off the diving board, in which case you actually haven't taken the next step, or you'll eventually walk your way back down. So this is the perfect way to not have to take the next step. Just tell yourself that you're going to fail, and then you want to take that next step. Okay, we're not going to leave it there though. We are going to look at the things that you could be doing instead to help you take the next step. So rather than people pleasing, focus on that rubric, those things that God has given you to do, the roles that you're supposed to fulfill, and how you're supposed to do them well, right? What it looks like to take ownership of that role, to do it well. And forget what everyone else thinks. Don't worry about that Facebook group that you belong to and what the 1,356 members are going to say. Focus instead on what God says, and know that the goal is maturing. It's not being there already. All of those people are going to have a ton of different standards and ways that you're supposed to be meeting this role. All you have to do is think about what God requires of you and then the strengths that He's given you so that you can fulfill that role. All right, number 2, instead of focusing on the lack, look at the good things that God has given you. Again, just like we talked about in the last video, you're looking at the strengths that He's given you, the gifts, the strengths, so that you can apply those into the situation, apply those to the things that He's called you to, and then see if you can outsource. So if you have a lack, figure out how to fill that, right? The problem is that once you start focusing on lack, it will always be there. There will always be things that we don't have. It's like this never-ending vacuum that you can continue to feed, or you can look the other way. You can focus on the things that God has given you, the direction that He wants you to go in, and trust Him to supply all of your needs, right? And you can remind yourself, go through all the verses that talk about my God will supply all of my needs. He knows when we are wanting, and He provides the difference for us. Whether it's in and of Himself that He is making up for our lack, or He is providing something for us so that we can improve and grow. Instead of taking on roles that you're not supposed to, focus on the roles that you've been given. And one of the problems with taking on roles that we're not supposed to is it's so easy to make excuses for why we need to do this, right? Well, my husband's not stepping up to the plate here, so if I don't, nobody will. That's not your job. Your job is to fulfill the role that God has given you and to leave the rest to Him and to the person that He's given it to. You can trust God as your Heavenly Father, as the higher authority, to make sure that other people do their roles. And there may be some kickback on you. You might have to deal with that for a while. But there is a blessing in knowing that God is holding each person accountable for the roles that they're supposed to fill. And by taking them on, you're actually delaying the process of them feeling the consequence of them not stepping up to the plate. So rather than filling up your scorecard with all these frustrations and then in the end feeling like a failure, focus on the things that you are supposed to be doing and making sure that your scorecard is actually measuring yourself on those things. Instead of spending time worrying about the what ifs, which is the future, or the what could have been, which is the past, focus on the present, knowing that the past is there for you to learn from, that you're growing from that, you're maturing, and that the future holds promise for you because God has promised us things. He has promised to bless us when we are following Him and when we're trusting Him. He's the one directing our path. So you don't need to spend time around that either. The goal is to take the next step. And that's why this channel exists, because rather than thinking 10 years down the path, are you doing the next step? Are you doing the thing right in front of you that you need to be doing? Or are you just spending your time worrying because you're looking way too far down the line, or you're just consumed by what was? And then instead of telling yourself that you're going to fail, so back to the kid on the diving board, imagine that kid said instead, I can do this, right? Eventually he would take the step because there's no other choice but to take the step forward, and knowing that you can do it. You have the ability to take this next step, and it's not as big as you think it is, right? And so that kid on the diving board, he's inching his way closer and closer, and I can do this, and he goes into the water. And it may not be a perfect dive. It may not look beautiful or elegant, but he's taken the next step himself. So instead of telling yourself that you're going to fail, I know that if I do this thing, I know what's in front of me, I know what I need to do, but if I do it, I'm just gonna fail. Tell yourself that you can do it. Because it's not about doing it perfectly, it's about growing and maturing. So I really hope that you're able to watch the 3 videos on achieving your purpose in life, because all of them tie into how you can get to that place where you can take the next step. When you're there, just make sure you don't sabotage yourself. Make sure that you're not shooting yourself in the foot so that you can't take that next step when you recognize what it is. So I hope that was encouraging for you. If you have any questions about maybe why you're doing any of these things or what you could do instead, need more details, more encouragement, leave a comment, or you can reach out on Instagram at Next Step with Helen. I would love to talk about these things, and if there's things that I need to dive into more so that you feel confident and prepared and able to take the next step, I would love to do that with you.